deal.
It could be a big deal.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
yeah. So we're back doing this again. Nos Audietis
Who's this
listeners. Richard, this is your thing with me. This is not just me.
yeah.
I'm
Happy
Jeremiah.
Friday, man.
Yeah, I'm Jeremiah Sheehan. Richard Farley is here again, and we have a special guest today, Ryan Rosenblatt, who you may remember from his days at SB Nation, but he is like, hopefully, if you're like a fan of U.S. national team on Twitter, Ryan is a guy that you should be following because he's like all over the place. He's traveling with the team and doing all kinds of fun stuff. Ryan, thanks for joining us on this show that we don't have a name for.
That's better. I think it's better that way. It leaves a little bit of mystery.
Exactly.
So wait, Ryan has worked for SB Nation. He's worked for Fox. He's worked for Eurosport. He's worked for technically Univision for a little bit. He's worked in professional baseball. He's done other stuff that is pretty prominent that he hasn't spoken about publicly. But the one thing people should know him from is his @ on Twitter. I mean,
Exactly.
I'm not even joking about that. The person most likely to be listening to this podcast probably knows all of us most through Twitter, which actually I'm now thinking I should finally need to start taking Twitter seriously then. Jeez.
You just talked yourself into taking Twitter seriously, you dummy.
Yeah, or delete it so they don't have the option of knowing me through it.
Yeah. So it's Friday of the World Cup draw. And so I think we're just going to talk about the World Cup draw and the adventure that is getting here. Ryan is maybe uniquely positioned among American media types to talk about Iran, and because he followed apparently a bunch of Asian qualifying. So this should be fun. And if you don't want to listen to this stuff, what are you doing with your life if you don't want to listen to this stuff? But this is your permission that this is not a normal episode of No.
You're doing rearing children,
right?
You're going and seeing different places in the world. Are you out
Yeah.
there not taking sports too seriously? What the hell is wrong with you?
So, let's start here because I feel like it's the most newsy element of this. Is this draw just happened, and my initial reaction to this as someone who doesn't follow a lot of these teams very closely is one, there's not really a group of death, which I think I may have stolen that from Ryan's Twitter account.
You're not American enough if you don't think there's a group of death. You know what the
Right.
definition of group of death is? It's our group. That's the
Right,
group of
exactly.
death.
Yeah.
Did you just start following soccer this year? This is a tradition unlike any other.
Right.
Totally
Americans,
exaggerating.
the difficulty
totally exaggerating the quality of the draw. Like the best really was 2010 when England was one of the weaker seeds, and there's no unmanageable game in the group. Group of death. We're in the group of death. I'm mad that nobody can credibly make that argument this year.
Yeah, there's no it felt like the most fair draw that we've seen. Like there was just a lot of even like a lot of groups where there's three or four interesting teams, but not. And I guess that maybe speaks to the depth of we're now at a point where there could be 32 teams in the World Cup and none of them look outright horrible. At least I don't know if that's probably overstating it, but there's a bunch of interesting groups. I think I guess by FIFA ranking, the United States is in the most difficult group, but that seems outrageous. Like there's no way it's the most difficult group, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think group of death, it's nice that your fourth team, the team that comes out of pot 4, is maybe better than you would normally expect from a fourth team, but you don't get credit for finishing in third place in your group as opposed to fourth place. It doesn't matter. The question is, how hard is it to get out of your group? And as a result, the group of death is made by an unusually strong pot 3 or pot 4 team. That's what a group of death is made from. There were really only 2 unusually strong teams in pots 3 and 4, I think, and that's Senegal and Ecuador. And then they got placed into the group with Qatar. And so that right there, I think, neutered any chance of there being a group of death for anyone, let alone the U.S. And I mean, you go back to 2010, 2014 or whatever. I mean, the U.S. kind of made a lot of groups of death because they were often underseeded by FIFA rankings or because of the geographic split they used back then. The U.S. was in pot 2, pretty much where they should be. So they're not going to make the group of death the way they did. Well, 2010 just wasn't a group of death. 2014, I guess you could kind of argue it, but
yeah,
we're the ones.
But you would have to overrate Portugal that year,
right? Exactly. And I mean, I remember
Portugal was just nowhere near as strong as people thought they were.
Right. And Ghana wasn't as good as they were then too. So there are a lot of reasons why I don't think that was a group of death, but I mean, there wasn't that team in pot 3 or pot 4. Now swap Senegal into one of these other groups as pot 3. Now we can talk about it, but it didn't work out that way because the two teams that were the scariest ended up with Qatar. So it's kind of just even across the board.
I guess I was
anything, I think
thinking,
because of like the constraints of the European groupings not being able to put confederations together in the way they did it, just pushing teams down. I think groups F, G, and H are the most compelling as far as balance. Let me just take G, for example. Brazil's the seeded team in that group. Cameroon's in that group. And then you've got Serbia and Switzerland. I think you can make a case for, almost any of those teams to come out as the second place team. You have to be very imaginative not to have Brazil at least finishing second. But I think the dynamic in that group is far different than Group B, where there's a clear 1-2. Not to say that the U.S. is going through, because losing to Iran or the other team that qualifies isn't the biggest upset in the world. But when we're talking about groups of death, there's a way more certainty going into Group B play than there is going to Group F, G, or H play.
Yeah, I mean, the question you look at if you're the U.S. and you're looking at it from that perspective is you got to get into the top 2. Whoever your seeded team, unless you pull Qatar or in 2010 like South Africa, unless you get lucky with a host. The question is, who is that non-seeded team that you have to beat out? That's the entire thing that matters to you. And in this group, it's not that Iran's not difficult to beat. Not that I think Wales in particular, if they come out of that playoff, they can be a little bit of a problem. I mean, they can defend a little bit, and Gareth Bale, maybe his functioning and plays like Wales Gareth Bale. But like, if that's who you got to beat to make it into the knockout stages of the World Cup, like nobody walks into the knockout stages of the World Cup, but you'll take that anytime.
So my theory about this group was that it's a good test. Like to me, it's all about 2026 as far as the United States is. It's all about like trying to get, and obviously you can't really prepare for 2026, but like that's the year where I think the expectations raised to a maybe unrealistic level. But this is to me like a great test for the United States, because if they get out of this group, it's like, well, they had to beat some decent teams to get out of it. And if they don't get out of it, then they don't get out.
Yeah.
Like, okay, good. Like
there's no like inherent, not inheriting any bad luck here. Obviously, right. From moment to moment, bad things can happen. But like you're kind of saying, if your litmus test to be a round of 16 team is Wales, that's a test that you should be like, okay, that's actually a relatively fortunate draw compared to the other options we have.
Yeah. And I mean, that doesn't mean it's going to go well. I mean, 270 minutes to define 4 years. It's just not great math. Like I don't recommend that, but I mean, that's what you sign up for in a World Cup. So, I mean, we're here now, but I think that it's totally good. And then also on top of just the quality of team that we're facing, I think stylistically, it's a pretty good matchup. And I mean, a team like Poland, I didn't want, like, let's say the US group against, say, Mexico's group, right? I don't think that Mexico's group is necessarily harder or really easier than the US, but Argentina could give the US problems stylistically. Poland in particular, I mean, the US has had a lot of their success, at least they're qualifying, because Walker Zimmerman and Miles Robinson are spectacularly good in the air, and Weston McKennie gives them an aerial threat. And they're able to win things that way. But you play Poland and they like to push 3 center backs up and sometimes have them in the attacking box. And you have Lewandowski up there. That's just a matchup that kind of neuters a lot of the things that the US want to rely on. Great. You don't have them. And so I think in addition to the teams not being that good, the US didn't draw a team that stylistically is going to make them especially uncomfortable or exploit them in particular ways. So across the board, super, super fortunate.
I'm also kind of like think Wales. I think Wales has a lot of bad karma coming their way for having Ryan Giggs as a head coach. Like, you cannot have Ryan Giggs as a head coach, even if he's in this weird kind of, middle ground right now, because you're trying to decide if is he evil and disgusting enough to actually lose his job. But just for harboring that guy for so long, there's got to be some point where he and his bad karma comes back and bites the Dragons in the ass.
Explain the Ryan Giggs situation. I don't actually know about Ryan Giggs' situation.
I don't know which of the situations to talk about here, but I think was the long-term affair with his brother's wife stands out to me, which of course then entails him cheating on his wife for a prolonged period of time. I don't really. Let's see.
He also currently has
is it domestic violence?
I know that they call it assault. I don't know specifically what the action was to assault, but he has a pending case for assault towards his ex-girlfriend.
So that's the reason why he's not technically the full manager right now. They have a caretaker manager until this is resolved, but it's been going on for like 2 years or something like that, a year and a half. So in addition to all these other things, and at one point he was like, I think, the subject of some tabloid scandal that had him connected with one of their kind of like tabloid pinup models. And again, this is extramarital. Basically, this is one of the most disgusting guys in the world. And that's a high bar. He's not one of the most disgusting guys in the world, but he's a very disgusting guy. He's not like a Saudi prince or something like that. He's a very disgusting guy. And I feel particularly aggrieved by it because this was my favorite player when I was growing up. So it's kind of like you put all your childhood hopes into this guy, and then you find out that he's not somebody you would even want to be in the same room with.
Yeah, I'm also just sort of like liking the possibility of playing England. Like, I don't know. I don't think there's any like logical aspect of that, but I do like really relish the possibility of like, in part, and we're already seeing it like in the English tabloids, like they're celebrating what an easy draw this is for them. And like, I love that. I think this is like a great matchup potentially for the United States, not because England isn't talented. I assume they're extremely talented. They're probably more talented than the version of this team that the US played in 2010. But I just like the idea of getting to play England in a competitive match and it being like, you got to be like a little brother kind of underdog situation. And
little brother underdog. That's great. Yeah. Those words came out of your mouth in succession. I mean, I'm not even saying you're wrong, but man, you just went there with the US England thing.
Yeah. Why not?
I mean, all I know about England, and Ryan knows this from following Spurs, is that if your goal scoring is reliant on a Spur, it's going to let you down at some point. So if I'm seeing a starting 11 and I'm seeing Harry Kane there, of course, that guy maybe is one of the top 5 or 6 strikers in the world. But I know there's this karma around Tottenham Hotspur that is eventually going to impact the England national team. And I want to be on the right side of that.
Exactly. I mean, I watched the U.S. qualify with my own 2 eyes 2 days ago. You can't hurt me today. So you can say all you want, but you can't hurt. No, I mean, yeah, there's nothing to lose, at least in terms of perception against England. No one expects you to beat England, but they're very beatable. They have a lot of really good players, but at least to this point over the last couple of years, don't really have any semblance of a team. And also like they have a second cycle manager, and that generally doesn't go great. And maybe Gareth Southgate's the exception, but history says that's probably not going to go great. And that's probably especially the case when you're the second cycle manager with the English media following you around all the time. So, I mean,
yeah, he needs to be done after this regardless, because he might be riding a little bit of that, second place thing in the last major tournament. Okay, let's build some momentum from that. We feel a little bit aggrieved, especially losing it where we did and how we did. But after this, he probably needs to be looking at a club job.
Yeah, and so again, England is a much more talented team than the U.S. England is a better team than the U.S. England should beat the U.S.
Inferiority complex.
But I mean, as far as seeded teams go, that wasn't the team that was striking fear in my eye. I was like, you're going to have a seeded team in your group, and getting England. Yeah. All right, let's do it.
Like, I would rather be underdogs against almost any seeded team. I mean, you want Qatar or Portugal, but beyond that, I kind of didn't care.
But I guess this is what my argument was, that when you're playing Qatar, you're expected to win, even though they're playing at home. Even though, I mean, I don't know how much that's going to mean here, but like, I don't know. I feel like they didn't look that bad in the Gold Cup when we saw them play in the Gold Cup.
Yeah,
I don't
not by Gold Cup standards, at least.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
They also won the Asian. Like that's a good team. Almost everyone on that team plays at the same club, so they're as cohesive and well organized. That's a solid team. We'll see what they get in terms of home field advantage, but it's also worth keeping in mind. It doesn't matter what the crowd is like or who the team is. You host a World Cup. the refs will give you every single play on the way there. We saw that with Russia. We saw that with Brazil. We saw that in 94 when the US hosted. Like, you go on and out. South Korea in 2002 was farcical. Like, you host a World Cup, you play a host country, you're going up against the refs as much as you are the other team. And I say that as someone who is ready to benefit from that in 4 years. Like, that's just the way it goes. So there is that too.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of like relishing this possibility. I also was thinking, I assumed that whoever Canada got drawn into would also sort of be a group of deathy site type of situation, because I think Canada,
that group looks tough, man.
Yeah.
That group looks fun. That is the group I'm most excited to watch, because all four teams play wildly differently. All of them have real attacking talent. That group is going to average like 19 goals a game, and
everybody in that group can put up 3 on each other in any of the matches.
And they all play super differently. So it's just, everything is like a clash of styles, but none of those styles are, we just want to pack the box and keep you from scoring. That's going to be the most fun group by a mile. I can't wait for that one.
That group has a high floor. Like, if a couple of those teams were in other groups, they would be serious threats to come out. And I think every team in that group is a threat to come out. But if I'm those teams, I would feel like, hey, we actually I would rather almost be in any other group. Like, every team in that group is too dangerous for anybody to have an off day.
Yeah. Then for the listeners who don't know, that's Group F. That's Belgium, Canada, Morocco, Croatia, which is that's a fun, like that. Yeah. Like you said, that's going to be a lot of fun to watch that group. And I think like the other group that we were kind of mentioning as a tough one was H, and that's Portugal, Ghana, Uruguay, and South Korea.
See, that one's a low ceiling group.
Yeah,
like it's a balanced group. I think anybody can get out of it, but honestly, I don't look at any of those teams and really think that's the quality of a seeded team. Like, I understand why Portugal was the last seeded team. The results speak for themselves. But look, there's a reason I just mentioned them is with Qatar, as far as teams that are like, hey, these are the groups you want to get drawn into, not only because of the quality of the team, but being in either an A group or an H group. An A group, you're going to get that big rest before the knockout round, or bigger rest. In an H group, you're going to get that big rest before your actual first game. So you get a little bit of benefits. I guess you can say it's a double-edged sword, or, the good offsets the bad. But either way, there's something to scheme around there.
Yeah, right, I mean, in that group, I'm also really excited to watch Korea, because they're not that good. They kind of lost a generation in there. They have some really exciting young players, and they got some old guys. But those old guys are Sun and Huang, who are just like 2 really good goal scorers. And their other one is Joe, who's a phenomenal keeper. And like, that group and a World Cup in general is set up so well for this team. And you watch them play, you're like, you guys are not that good, but you have 2 goal scorers and a great goalkeeper. Let's see if you guys can magic your way out of this group. Like, that could be like the weird one where nobody actually believes in them for good reason. Nobody's impressed by them for good reason, but they give you like 12 great moments, and all of a sudden they're in the knockout stages. And like, that's what I want out of a World Cup, is something exceedingly stupid like that.
Well, I imagine a lot of people don't know much about Iran. What can you tell us, Ryan?
I mean, Iran a lot of their players play at the same clubs. So, and they're an older group, and so
that's Persepolis. And what is the other big club there besides Persepolis?
Crap. I got it here. It's
Esteghlal.
There you go. And then they even have a couple guys who are playing together in the Qatari league. So there'll probably be some familiarity there as well. But I mean, they know how to play. They're cohesive. They know how to defend. But if you look at their ranking, which I believe they're up to 25 now, that is vastly inflated. They beat up on like Syria in World Cup qualifying. And then when they played better teams in Asia, and when they played teams like a UAE, or they played Korea, or they played a team like that, they basically played them about dead even, and then just like won it 1-0. And that's the thing. They did that against Iraq. They did against the UAE. They lost to Korea in Korea. They drew them 1-1 in Tehran.
That's not. I mean,
like it's not great. And like, even if you want to go back towards the beginning of qualifying in summer of last year, like, they racked up what looks like an impressive goal difference, because like, they beat Hong Kong 3-1, they beat Bahrain 3-0, they beat Cambodia 10-0. And then against like Iraq and Syria, there's a 1-0, a 1-0, a 1-0 over the UAE, like a 2-1 over Lebanon. they play a lot of teams that are mildly functional, very even, and then somehow manage to win almost every single one of those games. And so, listen, maybe that's a skill. Maybe they just really know how to gut out wins. I'm betting more that they're on a run of luck, which that's okay. That's international football. You need a lot of luck, no matter what you do, small sample size and all. But if that's not a team that I'm terrified of. That's a team you could absolutely lose to. It's a team you could absolutely draw against. They're not easy to beat, to use the term that everyone loves to use. But I don't see a lot of fear there. I think that their ranking is just spectacularly inflated.
Well, we know based on history that the U.S. has never lost an important game to Iran, so we can go ahead and continue speaking over it confidently about stuff.
I mean,
I think one thing,
if nothing else, theoretically, we should not be playing them for last place in the World Cup. So, I mean, I think you might be. I think you might be using important a little liberally there.
Okay.
This is 98. In case anyone is, that's 98 that we're talking about, right?
Yeah. Well, no. So yeah, that would be 98. Sorry, I'm getting my numbers mixed up. But it was it was when we were supposed to be good, but as our first golden generation started phasing out, and so like Ryan is saying, it was basically to avoid last place, and we couldn't avoid it. So there's a little bit of pride
maybe
there.
We won last place. You got to look at it another way.
Yeah. Hey,
there can only be one thing.
People.
Everyone remembers who finished last. Nobody remembers who finished 29th.
That's a very good point.
I think the other thing people should know, and this actually affects African rankings a lot too, is that FIFA's rankings are a point system. Depending on the level of competition, your games are worth more points. World Cup qualifiers are worth a certain level of points more than friendlies. Asia has a huge qualifying tournament. They have, like Concacaf had before the pandemic, they have 2 rounds. Only both of Asia's rounds are huge rounds where you play a lot of games. So I looked it up. Iran has played 18 qualifiers to get to this point. And because Asia is such a big and diverse confederation, there are a lot of bad teams in Asia too, just like there are a lot of bad teams in CONCACAF. Like, imagine if the United States were able to rack up points by playing 8 game kind of pre-ultimate stage rounds against just the bottom of CONCACAF. That's what happens in Asia. So the teams that are consistently good in Asia get that initial round of 6 to 8 games to pile up those points, and then they get a really good sample in the next round too. That's not to say they're bad, but I mentioned Africa. Africa's the opposite. Africa, sometimes teams get 6 games to make a World Cup. They just divide them into groups because they do qualifying for Cup of Nations too. They kind of divide them into groups, do this quick short play, and boom, they're through. So I might be out of touch with the current world, but historically, African teams have had their ratings suffer because of this phenomenon. And Asian teams, look, I think there's just reason to think that Iran's 25 rating might be a little inflated.
Yeah, I mean, for to your point there, in the penultimate round of qualifying, Iran got 8 matches, which were 6 wins and 2 draws, and those matches came against Iraq, Bahrain, Hong Kong, and Cambodia. They just got to rack up FIFA points in that one. And then even when they got to the final round of qualifying, they played 10 matches in their final round of qualifying, but they played 6 of those against Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. So those are matches where you get high point value because of the competition that it's in, but not because of the actual competition you're playing.
Yeah, let me look up their ELO rating, because the ELO rating would take into account the level of competition.
I know Ben Bear he tweeted something out that said the U.S. was actually in the 4th toughest group by ELO rating, which seems maybe a little more accurate.
Yeah, maybe I'm being a little bit critical, because even that seems a little generous. Like, we've already talked about 3 to 4 different groups where we're just like, wow, like this group, it at worst seems balanced. Maybe the ELO rating of England and to a certain extent the US is helping the average, whereas like the floor. Actually, in ELO rating, Iran's 24th, not 25th. So maybe I should just shut the hell up.
I mean, I've actually watched them play, and so I stand by everything I just said. They're a totally competent team, and that's how I would describe them. They're competent.
In ELO, Iran is 24th, Canada is 22nd. To me, I would need somebody to explain to me why Iran is so close to Canada. Intuitively, I guess I just don't know. I don't want to say too much, man.
But I mean, then again, this is also where you get into through no fault of the ELO ratings, or you could use 538s or FIFA rankings, and people bash the FIFA rankings all the time. The reality is they just international soccer doesn't play enough games in a reasonable schedule and amount of time to really be able to use numbers to come up with anything great. And that's not because analytics are bad, like some people like to pretend. The schedule does not lend itself. Small sample size and numbers don't go together great. In international soccer is an extreme small sample size situation.
That's a good point. There's no all powerful world soccer equality god that's saying, okay, we need to increase the sample of Asian teams playing against CONCACAF teams. So we're going to have a tournament. And the whole point of this is to get a sufficient sample size so we can actually have good ratings. There's nobody doing that. And after saying it out loud, I'm glad nobody is doing that, because that sounds boring.
Yeah. Just think about it this way too. And this is kind of a way that a thing that I bring up with international soccer a lot, where people are like, well, this team did this in qualifying, and you want to look good or have some momentum or whatever going into a World Cup. We're 8 months away from a World Cup. We are, and go back look at the US 8 months ago. This team looks exceedingly different 8 months ago than they do now. Like, the best thing that you can say about the US right now is that their center back pairing right now is as strong and good as it's been since Oguchi Onyewu got hurt in DC in 2009. This is literally the best we've had. It's rock solid right now. And 8 months ago, we were saying, who the hell is going to play center back? We thought John Brooks and some other guy, and we were terrified of who the second guy would be. And so, and now we're going to say, okay, now in 8 months, we're going to go play again. Also, in those 8 months, almost none of these teams are going to play competitive games, or they're going to play like 2 or 3 Nations League games. And then when they walk into the World Cup, they're going to do it on a week's training camp, having played 2 matches together in friendlies since the previous June. Like, we try and get really predictive about things. And I mean, we're doing that right now, just like guessing this group and how it's going to look come November. And we're doing the best we can. But I think it's also important to remember that the time in the calendar of international soccer makes it that every time they get together, like 46 things have changed since the last time they played together.
And also the Americans are going to have half their team off of that MLS Cup run. Like, this has never happened before. MLS Cup momentum going into the second biggest soccer tournament in the world, behind every MLS playoffs, of course.
I think the important thing that you got to remind everyone who just gets mad at every MLS player to have ever played for the national team is the player who scored the goal that got the U.S. back in the World Cup was Paul Arriola.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. That's they went through on goal difference, and it was Arriola's goal against Panama that put him in the World Cup. I mean, you don't get here without
kids
MLS.
Science. Kids, it's your generation's Paul Caligiuri. Go look up the name. Go look up the shot around the world. There's a Paul for all of us in every generation of soccer.
Well, that seems like a good transition to take us into looking a little deeper into the U.S., or at least the journey the U.S. went through. And I don't know that there's too many people out there that are better positioned to talk about that journey than Ryan, who is like a U.S. national team super fan. I think you could probably, is that fair to say that, Ryan? You travel all over the world with these guys,
like an unofficial roadie.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I definitely make a series of bad decisions to go watch the
shirtless in Minnesota. Weren't you shirtless in Minnesota?
I mean, like, yeah. to be fair, though, in my defense, before the game, someone's like, "Are you going to take your shirt off?" And at this game, I'm like, "No." And then I'm like, "Fine, if we go up 3-0, I'll do it," because like I had watched this team play a lot. We were never going to score 3. We scored 3.
No, that's how it
all
goes.
of us should have an inner San Jose Earthquake fan.
Yeah,
all of us should have a little San Jose Earthquake. Hey, you're telling me this is a good idea. It led to some great content, personal content.
On one hand, I have always made fun of Earthquakes fans for doing that, and I will continue to. And I feel like I could do this because they defend their actions, and I have no defense for mine.
Yeah, that's fair. But so real quick, what I heard a lot of positive things about this traveling experience, for at least from the media. Especially during this last window where the U.S. went to Mexico and Costa Rica. What were some of your highlights of traveling with this team, and what were some of your takeaways as far as what you either learned about the fan culture around? How is the fan culture around this team changing, I guess, is a secondary question, but let's do the first one first.
I mean, I really have I love, even putting aside the U.S., I love international soccer. It is just like the precise kind of like unpredictable and not very good and dumb that I enjoy. So it's right up my alley because like there's a lot of much better soccer. But you know what? Like this is it is really specific in how dumb it gets. That I really enjoy. And then I like to travel, and it's a really good excuse to go places. And so like you go to Panama, and like one day you're hanging out with some monkeys, and the next day you're watching this team beat the crap out of you, and then you go to Jamaica and you get to go from the beach there and eat some jerk chicken outside the stadium, like and hang and eat this jerk chicken while sitting on the foot of a Bob Marley statue. And then you go to the Azteca, and then you go to Costa Rica and San Jose, where despite moving from the Saprissa, which is famed as like the loudest, most intimidating stadium, they go to a new stadium that has a track around it. And I maintain that it is a louder stadium than the Azteca is now. Like that place is deafeningly loud, just absurdly loud. And their fans are super cool because they will cuss at you and flip you off and give you shit the entire game. And then as soon as the game is over, they're like handing you a beer and they have a great time with you. The Costa Rican fans are awesome.
Yeah, that sounds super cool.
Yeah, like the Costa Rican fans are really cool because they'll turn it on for 90 minutes and then after they're just like down to hang out. And also like Costa Rica has the best smoothies you'll ever have in your life, so that's a big bonus too.
Yeah,
No, I
underrated on that front as far as like the fresh fruit goes.
Yeah, the juice and smoothie game is off the charts. So yeah, I mean, Concacaf is maybe the dumbest of all the confederations, and as someone who loves dumb soccer, it's straight up my alley. And then especially this time, because there is not going to be any qualifying next time, I was like, screw it, let's go do all the CONCACAF we can. And if it wasn't for the week before El Salvador and Honduras, they were saying they weren't going to allow fans in, and then they weren't sure if there would be allowed fans in. So I didn't do those two for that reason. Otherwise, I would have done them all because, hey, it's the one last chance to go do a real CONCACAF qualifying for at least 8 years.
So you went to the other, Ryan, all the others?
Yeah.
So it was what, Canada, Ryan, Jamaica. Sorry, go ahead, Richard.
It's okay. No. You go through it first because I can come back to mine anytime. So you basically did the whole tour except for that Canada, Jamaica, Mexico. Mexico, what was it, 50% capacity when you were there?
Yeah, it was 50% capacity in Mexico, full capacity in Costa Rica, full capacity half capacity in Canada, very low capacity in Jamaica. They're the one place that really enforced they checked vax cards 97 times. They had a whole thing. There was very few people there. Jamaica took it real. The only place that really took it serious. And then Panama.
You went to Panama too?
Panama was full capacity, and that place was that place was amazing. They were loud as hell. You had a bunch of people who watched the entire game hanging on fencing, and they were playing drums from the fence. And I'm not really sure where they managed. Like, I don't know how they stayed on the fence and played. It looked like an athletic feat to me, better than anything on that field.
Yeah, the Panama game.
Well, Brian, what I was going to ask is, our last episode, we talked about AO culture a lot.
Yeah.
And actually, we talked more about American men's soccer culture and how AO is like this heightened version of that. How much of your activities going around and doing this are still connected to like American Outlaws in a way that it was when you first started doing this?
I mean, when I first started doing it, there was no AO. So we go back before there was an AO.
You are not that old. Shut up, man.
Yeah, I was. What did I did? What 1, 2? I did 3 U.S. Mexicos in Columbus before AO was founded. Or no, the third one was like right after they were founded, I think. But yeah, no, like we've done the before, done during, and now and then the during when they were the really the only fan group, and now you're seeing other fan groups pop up again, and I think that's kind of the most fascinating thing is for a long time. And even before AO and then through the I guess hegemony of AO, US men's fandom, and I think even to a degree women's fandom, because I think it's a little bit behind, but I could track this from like France in the last World Cup and Canada in the World Cup before that, and some of the other women's matches I've been to. There was a really, really singular American U.S. national team fan culture. Like it was, and obviously not all fans or whatever, but for the most part, there was kind of one type of fan. It all existed in one space or maybe 2 spaces. And I think now you're seeing a lot of different types of fandoms and a little different types of fan. And there really is no one or even two US soccer fan in the way that there was for, I mean, close to 20 years.
And what is it? I mean, how would you describe it right now? Like, do you like it more? Do you think something's been lost?
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, there definitely something has been lost because, as it splits up, you don't have all the fans in an away section or all the fans behind the goal or any whatever. It's harder to organize them now because they come from different places and you got different stuff coming up, and there are way more casual fans now who just kind of are like, yeah, it's like a World Cup thing, or the thing came to my city and that's cool, which is like great, but like they don't know any of the songs, and they have a much more detached and honestly probably healthy view of this. And then you have like now you see the Bar 76 showing up, and they're wearing their all black and they're singing, and that is a lot of them come out of LA, and it is a distinctly Latino fan group, and like that is obviously really different than anything that's really ever existed. Not that Latino people did not exist in the fan groups, because yeah, I mean, I'm one of them, but like they like it, you didn't hear a ton of Spanish. It was obviously a hyper white group. And now there is a fan group that is explicitly Latino. And even there, obviously not a hegemony. You'll see some white people and black people with them too. But like that is who drives them. And so you're seeing all these different things pop up. And I mean, I think now, and this kind of speaks to a maturity of MLS, and also something that tracks more with what you see among fans of other countries. You see more and more fans who are showing up who are like, yeah, I'm a insert MLS team here fan first, and like that's their primary thing. They are club over country, whereas it never used to be that way. It was always country over club. And now you have some fans who are like, hey, I root for the US, but I would rather see, like, you'll have the DC fan, well, I guess not anymore, last season, it was like, I want to see Paul Arriola succeed. Like, that's what I'm here for. And I hope the US wins too, but it's about DC or things like that. And so you're seeing all these very different strains of fans show up now, and so yeah, you lose a little bit with that, but also it's a growth and diversification of the fan group that, at least in some ways, is 20 years overdue.
I mean, it does seem like that's I'd never heard of Bar 76, but I think that's super, like, that's kind of exciting that there are groups like that are popping up.
Absolutely. And I think if you want to look at the organized fan groups, I mean, AO came from a group of fans who had gone to games and been like, yo, we want to have a party. We want to have a pregame. We want to sit and chant together. And Sam's Army just had given up on trying to do that. And they're like, cool, let's go do that. There was nothing that was serving what they wanted. And for a long time, they were it. But I mean, I think we've seen now AO is not serving what necessarily all fans want. Like, some other fans want something else served. And so the bars, I think, were kind of like that. And they're like, hey, like, we're not being served now by the fan group that currently exists. So like, let's just start our own, and then we'll be able to provide that thing that we wish was there. And like, I think it's just kind of a natural evolution that honestly is exactly why AO is here. And so like, that's cool too, to see a bunch of guys. And I mean, let's also be honest, as someone who was around then, I mean, I'm 33 now. And I was around when AO first started and was there. But like, a lot of the AO people and a lot of my generation, like, we're in our 30s now. Some of them are in our 40s now. Like, they're getting older. And let's be real. Like, a supporters group,
we're taking the ramps, not the stairs. Old people answer the phone like this, but young people answer the phone like this.
Yeah, but I mean, running a supporters group, like, that's a young person's game. And so absolutely, now you get the next generation who are like, hey, like, that ain't for me right now. Let's do that. And like, that's awesome too. And I think you're seeing a lot more, at least at scale, multi-generational fandom, which is awesome.
Yeah, and I'm curious, where do you come down on? I think this has been actually an interesting debate. Like, I was listening to Scuffed, which I really enjoy Scuffed. I think it's a great podcast, and they were talking sort of about this, the bad name that USMNT Twitter gets, in part because it's like the most toxic opinions obviously get the most attention, and that's sort of Twitter. That's like more a Twitter problem than it is like a U.S. national team problem. But I thought there was an interesting idea that they brought up, which was, there's this traditional gatekeeper, and maybe Richard and I are part of that, where it's like we've been covering this team for a long time, or we've been covering soccer for a long time, and there's these kids that come in with their expectations and their hot, like their unrealistic ideas, and we're like, get the fuck out of here. And that this in some ways the USMNT Twitter is a response to that and saying like, no, man, we feel differently about this stuff. But I don't know. Do you have much of an opinion on any of that? I don't know if I really stated an opinion, but I don't know. Where do you fall?
We don't need to ask questions on this thing. This is
I know, but I'm curious. Podcast. I am curious where you think of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think on Twitter, you definitely see it lean more in that direction, and Twitter is going to serve itself more by the people who are going to say a thing louder. So like that's kind of how it goes. But I think this is an area where you're also seeing kind of that growth in diversification of fandom, because it's really tough to have a person who has been around long enough, who can contextualize where we came from, who can contextualize why we're here, who have an appreciation and a knowledge for exactly where we are right now, and then is also able to look towards the future and be able to kind of chart a course and hold that in one hand. Like you're asking a lot. And here we're talking about fans, and like fans don't get paid to do that. Like fans do not get paid to hold every single part of that. And with this maturation of, we'll call the modern era of this team, I mean, we're over 30 years of that now, and trying to hold 30 years of history and results and growth and decline and everything that goes into that, like that's hard and that's a lot. And so I think what we're seeing is, and Twitter kind of holds its own space there, but at pregame parties, night befores, talking to fans, going to games, having my friends who I talk to, some of whom go to games, some of them who don't, some of them who are big soccer fans and like the US and kind of parachute in to go watch a big qualifier World Cup, then back out again, or other fans who just straight up don't really care except for the World Cup. You get the whole run the gamut there. And I think everyone's kind of bringing a little bit of that perspective, maybe two parts of that perspective. And that's good. I mean, I think that's healthy because, yeah, I mean, I can sit here and tell you what I think of the program and what I think of the team and various things that work. And I mean, I think that, I mean, I would hope that I think that I do a decent job of that, or else, I would have to question why I'm thinking that. That's kind of inherent to having a belief, is that you think you're doing a halfway decent job of it. But even like if I were to do it, like you need someone who's then going to be like, hey, maybe you're selling them short, and maybe that's why they like, maybe you should expect more of this team, or maybe you have the person who's just like, and to a degree, this was me on Wednesday night, when even in the stands there were a lot of people who were like, well, I don't like that we didn't play good and we lost. I never like losing. To which I'm like, two things. One, World Cup qualifying is a pass-fail course. We passed. I mean, 2002, we had a really rough qualifying. We had our best World Cup ever. 2006, we had our best qualifying ever, and we had a crappy World Cup. There's no correlation between doing a great job in qualifying and doing a great job in the world. Like they're not there. So one, it doesn't mean a lot to be better or worse. You qualified or you didn't. Second of all, sports makes us sad and mad enough on its own. You don't need to give it more reasons to let it make you sad and mad. If sports gives you a chance to make you happy, you should probably take that. So, yeah. But then again, like, hey, I mean, maybe I should expect more from this team. And I think those people are wrong, but I don't think there's anything wrong with having someone around who's like, hey, like, we should dream for better. You should expect better. I don't think that's, as long as you're not being an asshole doing it. Of course, there are people who are assholes while they do it, but also, like, if we're talking about Twitter, it's really easy. You don't have to follow those people. You can mute them. You can block them. My for the most part, national team Twitter is really pleasant because I keep my timeline curated to people who I like. And if that's a problem, you could get rid of them. That's your choice.
Let me share this bad analogy, because I'm starting to realize that maybe we're falling into the same problem in thinking about U.S. soccer culture that we did last week, where we were using American Outlaws as an exemplar of American soccer culture and maybe projecting that too much onto the broader culture. Here, if we're talking about like USMNT Twitter, That's like going to a concert and judging the entire landscape by the 12 people that are waiting outside the back door for the band to come out. Like, of course, they just by opting into that space, they're kind of self-identifying as the most fanatical, willing to do the most, say the most, get the most attention. It's like those are the people in the front row of the concert. If it's like a rock show, that behind them, American Outlaws are the people that are dancing in what we used to call a mosh pit. I don't know what the kids are calling it nowadays, but then you got the other 10 to 25,000 people that have just bought tickets in seats, and they're the rest of us. They're the people that are some people are going to, San Pedro Sula, and while American Outlaws is there, some people just know people in American Outlaws, and it's a good time. Other people are watching on TV. Other people are going to watch the World Cup. And yeah, when we go to a concert, we don't describe the show in terms of the people that are sitting in the seats and having a good time. We describe it in terms of who's the craziest on the floor. But sometimes when we're having these discussions, we have to step back and remember there are a lot of people in the seats.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, Greg Berhalter is never going to do an adequate job to the people who just desperately want him to play Freebird. He's not going to play Freebird, but like, that's okay. And I mean, even if you look at it that way, like having spent a lot of time in various AO sections, like there's a massive range of people, even in the AO section. Like it's super not a hegemony there either. Like it's not a single group of people. And we hear from some people, and I think that not that AO is faultless in any way, but we also define AO by a certain number of very loud AO person, when there are a ton of dudes and women who are there who are like 31 and 58 and this guy and that guy who like literally just are there to have a nice time. And they're like, you know what? I like this soccer team and I like soccer. And sometimes we win and sometimes we lose. Yeah. And then after that, I go back to the bar with my 5 friends and we sit in the corner and we bullshit about who should be playing central midfield next game. But like, without being super aggressive about it, we're just like, you know what? I think it might be better if we played Geo a little deeper. The end. And like, and that's just within AO, let alone the bars. They don't let it, people who are not like a fan.
Yeah, they don't let like some tweet from Todd in Greensboro define their fandom.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is, and I think that's kind of it's an interesting understanding. And I think that some fans and especially the media have just completely missed the mark on the last several years of US fandom and how it has changed and grown and kind of become a lot of different things and how difficult it is to define right now. And I think
that doesn't make a good tire commercial, man.
It does.
How am I supposed to put that in a tire commercial?
It doesn't. And I think also you're seeing this more and more, and I can say this at least this cycle, and especially 2019, having been in France, having gone to some of the games the women played after France, and then you hit a pandemic and then everyone comes out after the pandemic just wanting to go to games again. And I can say, at least in the stands, there are a lot of people who were used to just be men's fans who became women's fans. And there are a lot of people who used to be women's fans who have become men's fans. And you're seeing kind of a blurring of those two fandoms, which I think, for the most part, it's great for the women's team
It's great
for both. Well, right. It's great for the women's team to kind of grow that fan base because, they win stuff. And then it's great for the men's team because I think it's provided, at least in the stands, a lot, just a semblance of perspective and rationale that wasn't always there, and just like a less aggressive attitude. And I think a lot of whether it's someone who used to be a men's fan just experiencing a different type of fandom and then going back to the men's team has helped. And then also just some of those women's fans coming over. I think it's been really healthy for both of them, at least in my experience, coming out of 19 and then out of into this World Cup cycle.
Well, I'll say I think this is maybe naive of me, and not, this is not a cool thing to say, I don't think, but maybe you guys will
be the judge of that.
Yeah. But I actually really enjoy this team for some of the same reasons, because I feel like it's reflective of a certain type of diversity. And it's like, it's not like the country club team that I think the US oftentimes maybe was unfair, but like US that has sometimes defined American soccer. And this is a team that has players from all sorts of different backgrounds that look different, that are playing in various parts of the world. And it's like, and they seem to like each other, and they seem to, for the most part, be like kind of fun people, and they don't take too serious. Aside, a few of them do take themselves too serious. But I mean, I just think I just find it to be a group that you can get excited about. It's like fun to watch them grow, and I've enjoyed watching this sort of journey that they've gone through. And I was definitely someone who was skeptical of the idea that anything good could come out of failure to qualify last time. And yet I do find myself feeling like maybe there was a need, there was a certain fresh start that came out of that it feels like it's been sort of a positive change.
Dude, I'm so with you, man. I think this team is so fun. Like, just in its depth of talent and its diversity of players, this is by far the team that I've been most interested in since I became soccer conscious.
Yeah, I think part of it too, and even beyond that, is I see a lot of parallels between kind of this team and the way they're treated and supported and what they've meant for the program to the 2002 team that came out of there. And 98 was just so bad. And so many of us were just like, God, like, I mean, straight up, the 98 team was the first one that I got really invested in. And they were so bad and just such a mess that I was just like, maybe I'll be like one of those guys who really likes Brazil because they don't suck. And then it was the 99 team that actually made me be like, okay, no, I'm a US fan. And that 99 team saved me for the men's team. And so it was really rough though in that cycle. And then we could talk about how good they are in that 2002 team had a great run and the diversity and all those other things. It was also just there were a lot of young players who we were excited about. And also their youth was refreshing in a way because they really were just so happy to be there. And that joy is a thing that's really easy to grab onto and make you want to support them. And whether it was a Landon and a Beasley, and I mean, Clint Mathis wasn't young in that way, but he played like he was 19 years old, and you go on. And I think you're seeing that now with these young guys where it's just hold up. You're allowed to try stuff and have a good time playing soccer, and then be happy when the soccer and as a fan, you're just I want to go with those guys. That's fun. And we'll see over the next, especially because you're going to throw in the hype and the frankly bullshit of hosting a World Cup and what that means and expectations. And I hope 26 doesn't mirror 06 and go on and on. We'll see how that plays out long term and what that does for the fans. But I think for this cycle, at least, it's very similar to the 02 cycle for me, where it's just we were kind of beaten down and we're like, hey, look at these kids having a good time. Let's go have a good time with them.
And I think, you look at 2002, that was that. Oh, no, I'm getting it confused with 2006. 2002 is South Korea and Japan, right?
Correct.
Yeah. I got it in my head that it was 06. But because I think of 06 as even though that was a spectacular failure, they didn't get out of the group. The memory that is burned into my head is Clint Dempsey being so excited, scoring that great goal against Ghana, right? Yeah. And him just being really excited and being pumped up, and that is the image that gets stuck with me from 2006. And I couldn't help but see a lot of Clint Dempsey in Gio Reyna, especially the game against the Panama game, or the Azteca game, but the Panama game. Because both of them, right? But he had this back heel, and then he had that no look pass to Christian Pulisic. Pulisic, is that right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah.
Is who he?
Yeah.
Anyway, it was I just all of a sudden see Reyna, and he carries himself with yes, he's got a swagger and sort of this, I don't know, a little bit of an attitude, but he also seems to enjoy playing in a way that we don't always see Americans seem to enjoy playing in the same way that Clint did.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's also really easy to enjoy playing when you're good. So that's
right.
that's a nice change.
He's very good.
Having good players helps. But yeah, I mean, I think although to your point though, I mean, you look at 06 and the players who struggled was a Beasley and a Donovan, these guys who had all these expectations thrust upon them after 02. That the 06 was Clint Dempsey's coming out party. Remember, he didn't start at the beginning of that World Cup. He was just this dude who spent a couple years of the Revs out of Furman, and that was his time. And he was the guy who walked in with no expectations and no pressure and just this freedom to be let's go do this. And so, I mean, whether you want to look at a Beasley or Donovan or whoever in 02 or a Dempsey in 06, or basically this entire team in this cycle, there is that freedom and that joy that comes from doing this for the first time. And I think you absolutely see that. And it's listen, I'm excited to see these guys come back again in 4 years and 8 years and bring on more on and on. Like I really like these players as individuals. I like their talent, obviously, but there is something that is especially fun about watching any of these guys, whether it's this group or Clinton 06 or the guys in 02, do it for the first time.
Man, when you guys are talking about all this, you're reminding me why I like this team so much. And then I'm thinking about what the U.S. women are going through right now. And I'm starting to realize we're not seeing any joy on the field right now. We're not seeing anybody take chances. We're not seeing anybody connect with each other in a way that's developing a collective identity, a collective, want to accomplish something together. And granted, maybe they're just at a different place. They're not going through World Cup qualifying yet, but the women are boring right now for the first time in a long time.
The She Believes Cup was the first time that, like, in a bit that I really enjoyed watching that team play. And I think we saw that because you had an Ashley Sanchez who's just like, let me go do some stuff. I'm really cool. And like, that was the first, that was the Macario, Sanchez. That was the first time under Vlatko that it felt like maybe some of that joy and that transition and that youth was really starting to shine through. So, but yeah, I mean, you're right. Up until that point, at least, I absolutely felt that way. And at this point, maybe I'm clinging a little bit too hard to that She Believes is where we're going because I want that to be the case. But yeah, I mean, that same thing, like that was so much fun watching Kat and Ashley just go after it, that She Believes Cup.
Yeah, maybe I should take that more seriously. I think I've programmed my mind to never take a She Believes Cup seriously, but maybe you're right. I need to put that in my sample a little bit because it's not like, since Tokyo, there have been very many other games that are more serious than that. It's just they kind of went on their goodbye tour to some veterans, and maybe I'm judging it by that. But yeah, we're talking about the resurgence of Mal Pugh, the potential stepping forth of somebody like Sophia Smith. Like, these players are the people that I'm going to get excited about. The other players, even though you really respect what they can do, it is kind of like the last days of bringing in, like, okay, let's like the last days of Bruce in that cycle, where in addition to having like Pulisic and Darlington and these players that are actually good, you're bringing in the old heads. Okay, well, let's start Omar because at least Omar's been here before. Can't really get excited about Omar. He might score this ridiculous own goal that will remember forever.
I mean, the interesting thing for me will be this April window and then going into qualifying. And I think that'll be the test of, like, because listen, it's CONCACAF, and in women's soccer in particular, it's not the sternest of tests. Especially when you're as good as the US is, but you're talking about one tournament to qualify for a World Cup and an Olympics. You say what you want about the competition, you are taking that maximally seriously. And so I think it'll be interesting now that you have a Kristen Press who is coming back from her time off, and you have these various players who are the veterans who are going to be working their way back into the team. This April window, I think, is going to tell me a lot about, it was the She Believes Cup the outlier, or was that him figuring out who the young players are so he knows where to supplement the veterans around them? And if that's the case, this could be super fun.
Yeah, maybe like we're talking about here, he needs to not select players based on technical quality. He needs to start selecting them on vibes, because vibes are powerful. Vibes can be powerful.
Vibes are super powerful. I mean, Weston McKennie is the ultimate.
Yeah, he's the vibe lord.
Yeah, like listen, Tyler Adams or Walker Zimmerman may be the captain, but I mean, Weston McKennie is the director of vibes.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing too. Is like, people are like saying so much about, like, oh, Pulisic showed why he's the captain. He did this, this, and this. It's like, man, Weston McKennie will go out and blow up a motherfucker's sternum at any moment out there. He's the person that I want wearing the cape.
But I mean, even when you talk about vibes and kind of like what's fun about this team, and like it reminds me that, like, I mean, you go back to that Qatar game in the Gold Cup, and you just had Kellen Acosta just putting on a masterclass of shithousing, just trash talking the Qatari guy out of that penalty kick and standing in front of him and messing with and like that was a work of art, and that was so much fun to see. And then in this last game against Panama, and you had Luca Della Torre, just like he was out there being Pulisic's protector. He was pulling everyone back. He knew who he had to take care of at all times. And it's kind of fun to have these guys. You're like, okay, like, it's also good that Luca Della Torre is good at soccer. I highly recommend that. I like the fact that Kellen Acosta hits a great set piece and can do a thing, but I also just like the fact that, like, you see these guys playing these different roles and bringing like these like extra qualities to the pitch, whether it's like, I'm gonna make sure that Pulisic doesn't get his ass suspended out here, or Acosta just like, you think I could shit talk him out of a penalty? And yes, he can.
So this, not to cut you off again, Jo, but this reminded me of something that I wanted to bring up at the beginning of this podcast. One thing I hate about the draw, the names of the groups. Group A, Group B. Every single World Cup, they should select 8 soccer legends and name the groups after those. We got drawn into Zidane. We got drawn.
No.
We got drawn into what?
Hard disagree though, because the thing that I love about World Cups, and this is why I don't like joint hosts of any tournament, is I like how much, although, in this World Cup, this is not really a positive, but I like how much a tournament reflects its host country. I think that's super fun. And I want if we're going to go that direction, I want in this case, I want it to be something like pick the 8 most iconic foods or bands or locations.
Or
something about
around the country. Or in this country, it would just be Freedom 1, Freedom 2, Freedom 3, Freedom 4.
No.
Ford F-150.
I'm gonna do a definitive ranking of the best 8 Taco Bells in America, and those are gonna be the names of the 8.
Isn't the whole point that every Taco Bell's the same? Are you telling me that Taco Bells are different? Wait, I'm not asking you a
Taco Bell until now.
It's honestly embarrassing that you would say such a thing. You can't.
It's embarrassing that I don't have clarity on Taco Bells.
Yeah, I mean that's just you're just a person who doesn't understand America. That's what I'm gathering. Name anything more American than Taco Bell. It is just the gluttonous, most perverse, and in its own way beautiful thing that there is.
I get the feeling you've given this speech a lot.
I haven't given this speech a lot. But
you're just trying to get us to subscribe to your Taco Bell podcast.
I mean, I don't think the world's ready for that yet, but that's what I think. I don't want to name it after legends, because especially by the 5th World Cup, you're just making up dumb. And also you don't want to get burned by the legend who you find out 4 years after the World Cup is just super fashy. Or it's Ryan Giggs. That's no fun. But just pick things around the country.
Even worse than super fashy, Ryan Giggs.
the one thing I want and they're going to go the other way with joint hosts, because that's the direction they're going now. The one thing I want World Cups to always be is more representative of where they're playing them. Always.
You're right. I don't like the letters. If we can come up with something else, whether we're talking about monuments around the country or just city names, hey, we're in the Los Angeles group, although maybe that would imply that those games have to stay in Los Angeles, but just something hey, Bald Eagle, In-N-Out Burger Group, these things that are just so American. I mean, $6 gallon gasoline, the things that define America, mask mandates.
Yeah, fuel subsidies in Group 8, that. We can make
the Farm Bill.
Yeah, we can make all this happen. I mean, but
QAnon. We got drawn into QAnon.
The problem is that we'll evolve 72 different and more disturbing times between the draw and the actual tournament that we won't actually know what it is at that point.
Yeah, if there was a QAnon group, we might have to call up Jeff Cameron, right? I don't like this. Is a bad idea. We're going in the wrong direction.
I know.
I'm sure it's one group, and it's called Tim Hortons.
Listen, I have a running list of reasons why I do not want to. I'm mad we're hosting the 2026 World Cup, and this fake proposal on how to name groups has just made the list, because we're not equipped. We are not equipped to do this.
Oh my God, I would hate it. I would hate if I were still in the industry, because I would probably have to work it then. And I've made it my life goal to never actually have to go to a World Cup and work it, because you just get to see so few games that way. But I'm glad that that's not going to be. Well, hopefully it's not an option. Hopefully, my life goals stay on track. Knock on wood here a little bit, but I do think it's going to be annoying when Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless all of a sudden have very, very serious thoughts about soccer in 2020.
But see, this is the equivalent of my USMNT Twitter thing, is that no one's making you watch Stephen A. Smith. You get to curate your own timeline.
I got to be honest with you. I never watched Stephen A. Smith, and he is still a significant part of my life. You've known me for 14 years now? Do you think I'm the type of person that goes out of my way to consume Stephen A. Smith content?
I don't think you go out of your way to consume bad things, but I think that some bad things make it into your life at an alarming rate for someone who's trying hard not to consume them.
I know. It's dude, you can just block these things. Don't watch NBA Countdown. It's perfectly within your right to not watch NBA Countdown.
Listen, you've turned it into an art. So, I mean, I feel like
of passive aggressively consuming crap.
Yeah, I feel like you're like, I don't want to consume that. He says as he reaches his hand in for just like another heaping thing of it.
Oh my god!
Another
you just described my
taco.
whole Twitter strategy. It's like I tweet something and like, why am I even acknowledging to the world that I care about it? Delete. That's my whole Twitter all the time. It's like I do not even want to be on record about caring about the thing that I care about, because I want to be able to at least say I don't care about it. Yeah, I feel too seen right now. Way too seen.
Last 2 minutes, you have put more thought into. You've shown that you put more thought into your Twitter than I ever do. I have some. I guarantee you, like looking through my timeline is just terrifying, because I really should consider what I'm putting out in the world, and I'm really just out here bullshitting about like 4 things that I care about.
Oh man, even today, like I was like tweeting about the draw, and I'm like going, what's my next employer going to think about this? It's like, who cares actually? But the fact that like I am like circling back on all of these angles about, clearly I don't care that much about Twitter, but the moments I do, dig in a little bit too deep.
Yeah, well, that's okay.
Again, yeah, it's
you want sometimes you just want to be mad, and that's okay.
No, I never want to be mad, sir.
I don't know. Well, I feel like we've probably exhausted this particular episode of this unnamed podcast. It was great having you on, Ryan. I don't know if we keep doing this, maybe we'll have you on again. Maybe this will be the thing.
Yeah, sure, whatever you guys want. I mean, the question is, do I sit here in front of this mic and bullshit about some stuff, or like do I go down to the corner and hang out at the bar with 2 other friends and bullshit about some stuff? It's basically the same thing to me.
I'm definitely going to be at a bar in 55 minutes when my favorite bar opens. That's part of the reason I'm glad that we moved this up a little bit today. But I definitely think there's going to be a moment in the future, because this happens every 6 months, where there's some dramatic change to the Taco Bell menu, where they took something off that they don't even realize that people love.
No. The Mexi Melt is coming back. It's the other way. We're getting a reintroduction of a classic that was wrongly removed.
That's a classic.
And you want to tell me that all Taco Bells are the same, and you don't even know what a classic is? God.
Well, wouldn't they be offering that classic at every time? I don't understand the point of being a franchise if the experience isn't going to be guaranteed from franchise to franchise.
No. So for the most part, it is. There are a couple regional delicacies like the chili cheese burrito, but for the most part, it is all uniform. However, they remove the Mexi Melt from all Taco Bell locations. A terrible decision on their part, but they're bringing it back.
Is it because it's so disgusting and it has Mexi in the name, therefore it becomes offensive?
It seems like a great note.
I just can't believe you. Like, I know it's a podcast. I know this is an audio form, but you just come out here and show your ass anyway.
As people have pointed out before, that's actually my face, not my ass. Just because it's on my shoulders and looks like an ass, it doesn't mean the stuff coming out of it is shit.
Well, that seems like a great way to end this. Thank you for sticking around and letting us talk at you for a little while. I don't know. Maybe we'll do this again sometime. But
this is a great compliment to the breakdown of the last Sounders game, I think.
Exactly.
Is Schmetzer not using enough of his bench? I don't know. What do you think about the Mexi Melt?
Right, exactly. Actually, this may have been I'm not sure if we've actually recorded since the last time we did this. So this may be like on top. This is like
Aaron's never coming back.
Totally hijacking this podcast feed. But
oh my gosh.
Anyway, I'm Jeremiah Shan. Okay. This is not a podcast that we have a name for Richard Farley and Ryan Rosenblatt, and maybe we'll see you next time.